Chapter 4, Mishnah 1. The Mishnah continues its discussion of the Parah Adumah service. This chapter focuses on situations that can make the service invalid and thus disqualify the Parah Adumah. If the Kohen slaughtered a chatas cow, i.e. the Parah Adumah, not for its own sake but for the sake of a different type of offering, such as the shlamim, or he received the blood or sprinkled the blood not for its own sake but for the sake of a different type of offering, or he began doing one of these avodos for its own sake and finished the avodah not for its own sake, or he began an avodah not for its own sake and finished the avodah for its own sake, the Parah Adumah is invalid. The Torah refers to the Parah Adumah as a chatas. Therefore, just as a chatas becomes invalid through a wrongful intent of this kind, so does the Parah Adumah. The next Tana disagrees. Rabbi Eliezer rules that the Parah Adumah is valid even though its avodos were done for the sake of a different type of offering. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the Parah Adumah cannot be compared to the chatas, because the Parah Adumah service is performed outside the Beis Hamikdash, while the chatas is offered inside the Beis Hamikdash. Thus, although an intent of not for its own sake would disqualify the chatas, it does not disqualify the Parah Adumah. Another case in which the Parah Adumah is disqualified. If the Kohen performs an avodah of a Parah Adumah without having washed his hands and feet beforehand, the Parah Adumah is invalid. Since the Parah Adumah is compared to a chatas, and a chatas is invalid if its avodah was performed by a Kohen who had not washed his hands and feet, the same is true of the Parah Adumah. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with this ruling as well. Rabbi Eliezer rules that this Parah Adumah is valid even though its avodas were done by a Kohen who had not washed his hands and feet. Although this would disqualify a chatas, it does not disqualify the Parah Adumah. This ruling too is based on the Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that the Parah Adumah cannot be compared to a chatas. Another factor that disqualifies the Parah Adumah. If the Parah Adumah service was not performed by the Kohen Gadol, it is invalid. The Torah states concerning the first Parah Adumah in Bamidbar chapter 19 verse 3, "And you shall give it to Eleazar the Kohen, who was the deputy Kohen Gadol." By stating it, the verse implies that only the service of this Parah Adumah, i.e. the first one, was to be done by Eleazar the deputy Kohen Gadol, but all future Parah Adumahs require the Kohen Gadol himself. A dissenting opinion. Rabbi Yehuda rules that the Parah Adumah is valid, although its service was not performed by the Kohen Gadol, because the Parah Adumah service may be performed by any type of Kohen. When the verse singles out the first Parah Adumah by saying it implies that the service of that Parah Adumah required Eleazar the deputy Kohen Gadol, but the service of all future Parah Adumahs may be done by any Kohen. Other situations in which the Parah Adumah is disqualified. If the avodah of the Parah Adumah is performed by a Kohen who is missing one or more of his Kohanic garments, the Parah Adumah is invalid, and it must be done in the white garments that an ordinary Kohen wears. Even if the Parah Adumah service is performed by the Kohen Gadol, he must wear the white garments of an ordinary Kohen, and not the gold garments that the Kohen Gadol usually wears. If the Kohen or Kohen Gadol who is doing the Parah Adumah service is not wearing the white garments, the service is invalid and the Parah Adumah is disqualified.